And so it goes, and so it goes, and so it goes. All
And
right.
it wasn't a euphemism, by the way.
Okay.
That's pretty funny, though. I never even thought of that.
Service the old irrigation system. Yep. Because we're getting on. We need our medicine.
It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities.
Yes,
It
it's
wouldn't be a guy who works at an irrigation company, though. I guarantee you that.
it is strange that the difference in age, that like seeing friends like you retire.
Hmm.
It seems so strange to me. You know, like I just don't.
It's strange to me too, still.
Yeah.
And it's been almost 2 years. And yeah, I'm still not completely used to it, I gotta say.
And I just like it. I don't. It's not that I wouldn't retire if I could. I would, but although I enjoy what I do, but it's so funny because I just don't think about myself being that old. But I am. You know.
Yeah, it's funny how it's crept up on us
Yeah.
so quickly. Like it's such a cliche, but it's so true. And I remember my mom telling me this all the time that as the years go on, they get quicker and quicker and quicker. Like when I'd be complaining to her, like, "Oh God, I can't wait till the school year's out and we have 3 months of summer," that sort of thing. And she'd say, "Oh, just wait till you're older. Time flies plenty fast,"
But
and it sure does.
but it's funny because I still like listening to music, playing pinball, reading comic books. Like I haven't matured. I have in some ways, but not in other ways. I'm still that same guy, you know?
Well, um, I think the die is cast somewhat by the time we're 15. I think
Yeah.
we hang on to a lot of interests that we have as a 15-year-old into, our late 50s, early 60s, things like sports we played, or the things you just mentioned,
Yeah.
music, comic books, hockey, golf, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's just interesting.
If you think back to when you're 15, have you really changed that much other than maybe a few pounds and a few gray hairs?
More than a few pounds.
Yeah, it is a pretty
But
fascinating thing to
but the
think
line I
about.
always think of is Joni Mitchell's line from the Circle game, where she talks about now we drag our feet just to slow the circle down.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah,
me. I've got my foot on the ground. Hey, 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 slow that circle down.
a brilliant line.
Yeah. So,
She's been known to write a brilliant line or two,
um, she's another person though, as for everything I know, very prickly personality. But
like
it's
a
in,
lot of artistic geniuses.
yeah. But it's interesting though how many guys back in the Laurel Canyon days, they all had like a huge crushes on her.
Hmm.
Graham Nash, David Crosby, like all those guys, they were crazy about her. Neil Young. So,
Treated her like a bit of a goddess.
yeah. It's
Spoke about her in hushed tones
yeah.
almost because
Yeah.
of her talent, and then she was pretty on top of that, and that is a lethal combo.
Yeah, although I mean, just me personally, I never found her that attractive, but that was, just personal. And I like her music. I'm not a big fan. My sister was. I'm a medium fan. As I've said before, I like actually singing along to records, to music when I'm listening to it. And
Hmm.
very difficult to sing along to Joni Mitchell because her voice is so unique. It's so, shrill or not shrill, but like piercing,
Hmm.
in a way like you can sing along to Bruce. You don't have to be a good
Sure.
singer. You can sing along to Bruce,
Yeah.
but it's difficult with her songs. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
A very very distinct and unique way of singing,
Yeah, I mean,
phrasing.
it's her when you hear it. So, um, so we were talking about your favorite topic, rock deaths.
And not that I'm obsessed with that sort of thing, but
No, 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 no.
I find it a good way to kick off topics, if nothing else.
Well,
And it's interesting, I think, to look at these people, these musicians, typically who were important to us or are important to us as music fans, and to see when they start dying and the impact it has on us and perhaps society as a whole. Sometimes they pass without any notice, and then there's bigger ones like I don't know, like a who's a big one recently, like a Quincy Jones that has some mainstream impact versus somebody like um, David Sanborn, the saxophonist.
Yeah. I think it's also though like age and matter and manner of death. And so like when John Lennon, for example, died, you know, be,
Was there any bigger, more impactful one than
I can't,
that?
I can't think of one.
When you
Except
factor
for
in, sorry, go ahead.
back in the day, maybe Sam Cooke.
Oh, not as big as John Lennon.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think. Especially when you factor in how how important he was to mainstream culture, and then the early death and the fact that he was murdered, all those things
Yeah.
combined, I there can't be a
I'm
bigger, more impactful one than that, can there?
They announced it on Monday Night Football, like
Yeah.
during
Oh,
the game,
I
you know,
remember.
and
I
so
was watching it. It
yeah,
was the Miami Dolphins and I think the Minnesota Vikings because my uh,
yeah,
stupid story, but
yeah,
the Miami Dolphins were my team
right. As I know. Yeah.
as a 14-year-old or
Yeah.
15-year-old, and I was watching that game, and Howard Cosell, comes on and says, "I'm very." Sad to announce John Lennon is, the whole spiel.
Yeah.
You're the one who mentioned it, so of course you do. But
But so
yeah,
because it's like when someone dies, like some music person, and they're in their 80s or 90s or whatever, it's like okay, well, they had a good run and all, and but like he was early 40s,
he was 40,
40. Okay, yeah. So
and yeah, yeah, just
and had just
so
released,
huge.
a big solo album or,
His
duet album.
comeback.
Yeah.
I mean, that album was all over the place when
Yep.
it came out, and huge hit single. The
Yep.
the song "Starting Over,"
Yep.
huge #1 record, um, and then so this is what I was talking about earlier. On the other end of the spectrum, there's deaths like this 17-year-old girl. Her name was Nell Smith. I can't, did I talk about her last time?
No.
Okay. So who she was, she's this young girl, lives in Canada, who was a big fan of the Flaming Lips. The Flaming Lips played up in Canada. I think it was Calgary. And she got to meet them backstage because she was a super fan. And they found out that she was a singer and a pretty good singer. And this is when she's 13 years old. So they ended up collaborating on a record that came out that I have. It's the Flaming Lips with this girl named Nell Smith, 13 years old, doing a record of Nick Cave covers of all things.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, just the strangest thing, completely out of the blue. And it actually happens to be a pretty good record, I got to say. Um, and she tragically died in a car wreck last year at 17.
And so I think that like obviously she's not that well known, but I think that's certainly more, sad, more sad, more,
Totally.
yeah. Uh,
17 and with this bright future
yeah. As opposed
ahead of her, just so tragic and so sad.
as opposed to like, back in the punk days, as opposed to someone like Darby Crash or Stiv Bators, where like, yeah, they died early, but you knew they were going to die early.
And pretty much self-inflicted
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Darby Crash completely self-inflicted. So, also the guy for Jeffrey Lee Pierce, the guy for the Gun Club.
Hmm.
So, but
Same
you
same
know,
sort of thing.
yeah,
Just kind of fuck ups in life,
yeah,
drug abusers, alcohol abusers, whatever,
yeah. So is
and
it?
fuck ups and who are, they're almost earmarked to go out
Yeah,
in a
and
flaming
so even
ball.
I really like the Gun Club, and I saw them in concert. I really liked them live, but I was not surprised. I was like, oh yeah, he's dead. That figures. Johnny Thunders. Oh yeah, that figures. Like
Amy Winehouse.
yep. There's another one where
I,
you just
I distinctly remember um, uh, Stephanie, who was my girlfriend at the time. I remember saying to her, because I'd seen the news online, I said to her pretty coldly, I said, "Oh, Amy Winehouse finally died."
it was just a matter of time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and after Jimmy died and Janice died, Morrison left on his voicemail, his or the answer machine back in those days. His answer machine message was, "You're drinking with number three."
Oh, really?
And then, of course, it turned out to be the case. So.
Huh. That's pretty funny.
So, but we'll go get back to rock dust in a minute. I did have a quick topic I want to introduce because
Hmm.
I've been thinking about it because I've been, as you know, I was watching the music documentaries and watching one on the Police and one on Steve Marriott. And the Police, it was a matter of time before Sting, was going to leave the band and go on to greater things, as opposed to Steve Marriott leaving the Small Faces, where they were quite surprised he left. And I was thinking though, after Steve Marriott left, though, the Small Faces became the Faces, as you know,
Hmm.
and were, if anything, even more successful. And
Hmm.
apart from AC/DC, where when Brian Johnson, took over as lead singer, has there ever been any other band that was more popular after replacing their lead singer?
Yeah. I forget who it was, but we had talked about
We may have talked about it before
that
briefly. Yeah.
scenario,
Yeah.
and I'll see if I can conjure it
Okay.
up, but I can't remember
Because
who it was off the top of my head. But there was one that was a pretty pertinent example of what you're talking about. God,
because
who
like
was it?
because I'm sure like with the Police, they weren't thinking, oh well, let's just get another lead singer.
No,
You know
no. Let's
that
let's
wouldn't.
get Jello Biafra
Yeah,
to front the police.
and dye his hair blonde. Yeah, and so there's just certain ones, and it must be so. I was also watching a thing with John Fogerty, and he was talking about how he didn't realize that his bandmates were jealous of him, and at first that sounds sort of arrogant, but I'm sure they were. And he talks about how he said, I've written these new songs, and they were like, yeah, of course you have. And then they were in the airport, and someone ran up and said, "Oh, you guys are Creedence Clearwater Revival." And and the guy said to John Fogerty, "Can I get your autograph?" Got Fogerty's autograph, and then just left. Okay,
Yeah,
and that must be tough to be in a band like that.
I would think so.
You're super successful, so you don't want to walk away. But
No, that'd be biting the hand that
yeah,
feeds. Any sort of resentment against him is like a great example of biting the hand that feeds you
yeah,
because Credence, for all intents and purposes, was John Fogerty. And I think some of what you're talking about stem from the fact that when they first started, they were called Tommy Fogerty and the Blue Velvets.
yeah,
So it was his brother Tom. It was
yeah,
really his band to
yeah.
begin with. And as they went on, they became the Gollywogs and then
Yeah,
Credence.
you're
As
right.
they went on, it was pretty clear who was the enormous, major, once in a lifetime talent. And that
Yeah,
was John Fogerty. And the rest were great. Great
yeah,
rhythm section,
yeah,
great rhythm guitar playing by his brother Tom. But who was writing and singing those songs and playing lead guitar?
yeah.
Undeniably, his band.
And it's just so interesting how that works. In the Tragically Hip documentary, they talk about how they were all like the three of them were the main songwriters. And a couple of years in, the lead singer Gord Downie said, "Look, I'm singing the songs. I'm writing all the lyrics." And the band almost broke up.
Mm.
And then they're like, "All right, fine." And he
So
just wrote all the lyrics from then on.
you had brought that documentary up before,
Yeah,
hadn't you?
yep,
Okay,
yep.
so
Because you said
you,
David watched it as well.
yeah, my friend Dob, and
Yeah,
just recently I talked to another friend of mine, Jamie. He recommended it as
yeah,
well, and I couldn't remember if you brought it up or not, but everybody has said the same thing. Even if you're not really into that band that much, which I'm not, I don't
yep,
really know their stuff.
yep.
Um, Everybody says it's such a great documentary as far as music documentaries go.
Yeah, because they had so much footage and so many interviews and all this stuff that they could do, and you really saw like here's the rise, and then here's the drop back, and then here's this, and then it's a really like a storybook about how what happens when a band becomes how hard it is to become a success, then the problems when you are successful, and then as the band's now been together for 20 years, I mean it's just interesting. And so I don't think there's a better one in terms of that, of showing you all of that. And a lot of behind the scenes stuff of guys talking about each other,
Hmm.
the pros and the cons of their bandmates. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say, oh, Tragically Hip are the best band ever, but I'd say it's certainly, I think, the most interesting documentary in that way.
It's right at the top of my list of things to watch.
Yeah.
So are you a big fan of the band or a
I no, I
somewhat
like
fan?
I'm somewhat fan.
Yeah.
Kim's sister liked them, so Kim liked them. So Kim turned me on to them, and she had a few of their CDs. We saw them live a couple times, and they're quite good. And I liked them, and would have seen them again, but certainly wasn't like, what were like maybe top 50th band for me. Like they're not, I like them, but I don't, I do
Sure.
love one song, Fireworks, fantastic song. How many rock songs name check Bobby Orr? Like, so that is that is a great song. But it's funny, they were successful here. They were massive in Canada. Like they're
That's
the
what I
Rolling
understand.
Stones in Canada, you know?
hmm Um, as I was telling my friend Jamie when we were talking about it, I remember watching Hockey Night in Canada the week Gord Downie died, which was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And they did a big expose on him to open up Hockey Night in Canada.
I mean, he was huge,
Yeah, clearly.
yeah, and a lot of Canadian musicians and Canadian hockey players, they were like, huge fans of his, and of the band. And it's interesting also because at first he was a sort of, you'll see. I don't want to actually tell you this.
Yeah, don't give away
Yep,
too
yep. That
much.
that's where I stopped. Yep. So okay,
Because I definitely am going to watch it.
yeah, and it's a 4 episode thing.
Three people whose tastes I trust have recommended that to me in the highest way possible.
You certainly couldn't not like it. I mean, like, there's nothing to
Yeah,
dislike about it. So,
a good
um,
music documentary, man. It's yeah. There's not many things that I like watching more than a
yeah,
good
no,
music doc.
I love them, and in particular, so have you seen the Police one called
Is it
Can't?
the one called All Around the World?
No, it's called Can't Stand Losing You, and it's based on Andy Summers'
Oh,
autobiography.
no, I have not seen
Okay,
it.
and Andy Summers like acknowledges, like, once they made it, he was an asshole,
hmm
and it's a breath of fresh air to see as someone like realize, how it's like. Did you any of your bands ever have riders?
Um, we think we probably did
Like,
at like a show or two. We played a couple big shows here and there, and probably had a writer of some sort, but I don't remember anything um, interesting about it. Like where we
because
were fucking around and said, "Oh, we take out the brown M&Ms or
yes,
whatever."
because
So I
because
I have no good story about that sort of thing.
I think those are examples of, like, you can tell when a band is like, become way too big for their britches when they're like their riders are ridiculous, you know.
hmm Yeah, the classic example, of course, that everybody knows about is that Van Halen
Yes.
supposedly, well, I guess they did in their on all their writers, they wanted a big bowl of M&Ms backstage, and all the brown M&Ms had to be taken out of that bowl.
Yes. And there was another band, I can't remember which band it was, although I'm sure it was more than one, who they had the audience sort of like divided into quadrants, and they would like, so they could tell the roadie, hey, that girl in the middle of like quadrant 3, like, bring her backstage after the show.
A lot of them supposedly
Yeah,
did
and
that.
that's what I'm saying. There was one band in particular, but I'm sure there were many. So
Um, and going back to Andy Summers, I think he is, and I wonder how many successful musicians fall into that trap, that fame trap, where he'd been plugging away for years and
yeah,
years before he joined up with Stewart and Sting and the Police. Like, for example, he played in a later version of Soft Machine. He played in a really late version of The Animals
yeah,
before he got together with those guys. And he was about 10 years older than Sting
yeah.
or Stewart Copeland. And I just wonder how much of that factors in turning into an asshole when you've been grinding it out for 10 or 15 years, not really having any sort of success. And then suddenly, overnight or over a year or two, you become, at the top of the heap. Is there any way you can't turn into an asshole?
Well, it's funny because he definitely describes Sting the same way, and Sting didn't have the same journey that he did. But yeah, so at one point he was in LA playing with the Animals, when the band broke up, and he talks about how every band he was ever in broke up, so he wasn't that surprised when the Police eventually broke up. But when he was in LA, he was so broke he had to call his dad to send money so he could fly back to England. And then suddenly, like, a few years later, he's a multimillionaire, you know. Um, and uh, yeah, I think I wonder how many musicians, how many, like, very successful musicians Okay. And then also I think it goes to actors. I think it goes to, sports, athletes and all. How
Hmm.
many are like, oh, they're really nice, they're really humble, they're really down to earth. I'm sure there are some, but probably not that many. I doubt Mick Jagger would be the most down to earth guy you've ever met in your life.
Well, I do. Speaking of Mick Jagger, I have a friend who hung out with him on several occasions and said he couldn't have been a nicer, more down-to-earth dude.
Yeah,
And
well then there you go.
this is a guy who, and I'm talking maybe 15 years ago,
Okay.
so it's not like he was at the beginning of his success.
Yeah. This is back
Um,
in 1961.
and actually, at this point, it was 20 to 25 years ago. But anyway, um, he knew him, this friend of ours. When I say ours, he was a friend of Sushi Robo's. And when we'd go tour up and down the West Coast, we would stay at this place that he was the caretaker for in Carmel, California, this big, huge mansion.
Oh yeah, I
And
remember
any
you talked about that guy. Yeah.
yeah. His name was Todd. But anyway, somehow he was a bit of a jet setter
Yeah.
and was like, I don't know how you describe him up other than that, but he'd be at parties where Mick Jagger would be
Yeah.
and became friendly with him. And he had this one story of where he was going to some big dinner party and he walks in by himself and there's all these famous people there. And Mick's at the end of the table and looks up and sees him and goes, Todd, and like, and Todd's a nobody
Right.
essentially compared to all these other people, but that's the evidence that Mick was a down to earth, pretty cool
Yeah,
guy,
no, that's
according to this
awesome.
friend of mine.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. One of my favorite stories is my sister-in-law, Malia, who's classic. You'll have to meet her sometime. Um, she's a screenwriter, and so she
Right.
also at various parties and all. And her and my brother at this party, and she sees this circle of men all surrounding one guy, and they're like hanging on this guy's every word. And she's like, at this party with all these like A-listers. Who is this one guy who's got all these other guys captivated? So she sort of fights her way through the circle and sees the guy, and and she says, "I know you. I know you. You're famous. It's sports." And then she goes, "Oh, but you're just the coach." And it was Pat Riley. And if there's anyone who doesn't think of himself as just the coach, it would be Pat Riley.
Yeah.
So
That was probably at the
yeah.
height of the Lakers and their dynasty years.
Yes, yep.
So
And
like in the late 80s. Oh shit. There's the guy. Hey, can
okay,
we just put this on pause?
yeah,
Okay. I'll be back as soon as I can.
okay. Do you feel better now?
The irrigation has been serviced.
Aces. Um,
Can you tell it's sunny here by my
uh,
transition lenses?
yes.
You'd
Uh,
think I was in Austin.
yep. It's gonna be I think 92 tomorrow.
Good
Uh,
Lord.
so, um, so by the way, Rock Deaths, another one I was not surprised by, even though I was a big fan, Ian Curtis
Oh,
from Joy Division. It was just a matter of time before that guy offed himself. So, I was more surprised by Michael Hutchins from in XS.
uh,
But again, like my attitude is, or it's like when George Harrison died, when Prince died, I'm just like, well, that's or when some actor dies, you know. I felt a little more connected when David Johansen died because I'd met him and talked to him. But
mhm.
for the most part, it's like when someone dies, I'm like, okay, well, I just and I told you before when I worked in the record store, as soon as someone died, fucking people would flood the store wanting to buy all their albums. Like that
Yeah,
drove me
that still
that drove
goes
us
on.
all crazy. Like everyone who worked there were like you didn't want to buy this record 2 weeks ago? Like, it was so
Just
stupid.
a weird example or a good example of really weird human nature.
It is so strange. Um, Watching the Steve Marriott documentary, by the way, prompted
I
me.
saw it,
Oh,
by
you
the
saw
way.
that one? Okay.
Yes,
And
very good.
so listening to some of the Small Faces stuff, man, Zeppelin's Whole Lot of Love is such a lift from the Faces You Need Lovin', which is the Willie Dixon song.
Hmm.
Because just the vocal like range is so similar to Steve Marriott's. It's funny because Plant was a big fan and used to follow them around from show to show.
Yeah,
Um,
just one of a million bands that Led Zeppelin ripped off.
Yes. How
Uh,
was though becoming Led Zeppelin? How was the movie?
it was really good,
Okay.
really good. Uh, the thing I liked about it so much is it included a lot of stuff that, as a big Led Zeppelin fan, I'd never seen or heard before. Footage, old performance footage of them, like right when they were still called the New Yardbirds,
Yeah.
playing up in Norway or Sweden or somewhere up
Yeah.
there. Just when they were still super young and super hungry and just like they almost had superpowers. They were so fucking good at that point and just so vibrant and just like almost I probably used this description before for another band, but almost like levitating off the stage. They're just at the height of their powers
It's
and really
awesome.
raw,
Yeah.
you know.
But it's awesome to see a band like at that point, no matter what band it is. I remember, I think I mentioned before briefly when my sister and I saw King Crimson for the Three of a Perfect Pair tour.
Hmm.
Uh, the musicianship was unbelievable.
Hmm.
It was just off the charts. Now, they're not Led Zeppelin, and obviously they're completely different. But when you see a band like at their peak, and my problem is like
Powerful.
when I saw the Who, they were so far past their peak. Like it was, and it's like, I was like, it was fine, but I was like, I didn't need to be there. When I saw the Stones twice, both times again, way past their peak. Uh,
Newser.
one time in San Francisco, and then a time in at Wembley Stadium. But it's awesome to see a band, and I've also seen bands who went on, to be more successful after I saw them. But when you see a band at just the right moment, it's like if you see the Stones in '72, if you see Bruce in '76, like those are the Who in '68, you know.
Hmm. We just had the problem of being born too late,
Yeah.
which is kind of weird to say at this point when we're this old to say that we're born too late.
Uh, and so I used to really feel that way though, back when I really listened to like mainly classic rock, British rock, stuff. And then when I started thinking about it, but I was born to get a good time, not to get drafted, and
That's right. That's the real sweet spot of being Gen Xers
yes.
is that there was really no major conflict going on that would you know send us to our early demises.
Yeah, I did not want to go to the Falkland Islands to fight, but
Um,
uh, but I mean, it'd been cool to be in San Francisco in like 1967.
sure.
But not as a 17-year-old where I'm watching the fucking ping pong balls on TV to see if I'm getting sent to Nam.
Oof.
So
Oof.
yeah.
Um, so here's one that really hammers home the getting old thing is Greg Kinn died last year
Oh wow.
and
Yeah.
he died of with Alzheimer's.
Wow.
Sorry, I'm laughing, but
No, but that is bizarre. Yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
he's not that much older than us, or
no,
he
he can't
wasn't
be.
that much
Yeah.
older than us. I would guess he would have been like 8 years older than us, maybe.
At the most, I would think. Yeah. I liked the breakup song. That was
Catchy
catchy.
hit.
Yeah.
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 He had
Could,
a
as
few
you
really big hits.
as you know, I really like catchy. I always think of you. I think of like you liking albums and me liking singles.
Hmm.
Like you like
Uh,
music and I like songs.
huh, huh. That's an interesting way of putting it.
And it's not that you don't like songs or I don't like music, but like soundtrack albums, I like them, but not as much as you would like them. And you certainly don't like pop hits as much as I do.
Well, it depends on the pop hit. If you're talking pop hits from say 68 to 76, I pretty much love them,
Okay.
all of them.
Yeah.
The cheesiest, Sky High by Jigsaw
Well,
or Magic by Islet, all that stuff.
love grows where my rosemary goes.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
That's when mainstream top 40 music was just firing on all
Yeah.
cylinders and was really good, really creative. Suzanne and I used to drive around in the car on a Saturday because Sirius satellite radio would
Yeah.
replay Casey Kasem top 40 countdowns from the early 70s. They would do that on Saturday afternoon, and we would just go out, be driving around listening to that and just enjoying the hell out of it.
I used to
So I
tape
love that stuff.
I used to tape those shows back in the day with my Craig boombox.
That
uh,
probably had an 8 track on it, or was it cassette?
no, just cassette. I've never owned
Okay.
8 tracks, but it was cassette. And it would like, here's Casey Kasem with the latest, and he'd always have like, some like quick funny story, and then yeah, you'd hear the songs. And so yeah, so all that stuff from probably started doing that in 74 to 77 or whatever. I don't
hmm
have those tapes anymore, but like I remember, certain songs and all. So
Um, I have a bunch of those KTEL
yeah.
compilations of songs that were hits during that era. That was my first exposure to music, because my mom used to have those records, and I would listen to them when I was like, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I still have a real soft spot for those. And I probably have 20 of them. And if I see one that I don't have and it's in good shape, I'll pick it up usually. And it's filled with all those
Oh yeah.
songs we're talking about.
It
And
was
man, they hold up.
it was the only time I had an album that had a song both by Bay City Rollers and Thin Lizzy.
Yeah, yeah, they were exactly like that. And
Yeah.
further evidence that top 40 music could be really, really good. The Thin Lizzy part, and even like, I don't know, Saturday Night by the Bay City Rollers. That's a
Eh,
pretty good pop
Yeah.
tune.
And I loved the